Emmeline Crawford pressed her hand against her mouth to stop the scream. Mr. Mercer's shadow moved closer in the dim stockroom, and she knew no one would come. No one ever came for girls like her. But then she ran. Barefoot through the Texas dust, she ran until the creek swallowed her whole. She thought she was finally alone. She was wrong. A stranger sat on a black horse above her watching. And nothing would ever be the same. If this story touches your heart, subscribe now and follow Emmy's journey to the very end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this tale travels. Garrett Sullivan had built his empire with two things: silence and sweat. 38 years of living had taught him that words wasted time and trust wasted more. So when Silas Turner rode up beside him that June morning, Garrett didn't bother looking over. "You gonna talk, or you gonna sit there breathing loud?" Garrett said. Silas chuckled low and dry. "Just wondering if you plan to die alone on this land, or if you got other arrangements." "Arrangements. A wife, children, folks to carry your name when you're gone." Garrett's jaw tightened. "My name dies with me. Less trouble that way." Silas shook his head slowly. "Man builds all this." He gestured across the 35,000 acres stretched below them. "And don't want nobody to share it with. That ain't strength, boss. That's fear." Garrett turned, then his eyes cold. "You work for me, Silas, not the other way around." "I work for you 'cause I respect you." Silas replied unmoved. "But respect don't mean I can't see what's plain. You're lonely. Been lonely so long you forgot what else there is." Garrett said nothing. He pulled on the reins and rode toward the south pasture, leaving Silas behind. But the words followed him. They always did. By evening, Garrett sat alone at a table built for 12. Josie Blackwood had set his supper out: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, but he barely touched it. The house stood quiet around him, grand and empty. Josie appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "You ain't eating." "Not hungry." "You're never hungry." She walked closer, her voice softening. "Garrett, when's the last time you laughed? Really laughed?" He looked up. "What's that got to do with supper?" "Everything." She sat across from him, uninvited. Josie was the only person alive who could do that. "I've known you since you came back from the war, watched you build this place from nothing. But somewhere along the way you stopped living. You just started surviving." Garrett pushed his plate away. "Surviving's enough." "No," Josie said firmly. "It ain't. Your mama, God rest her, would have wanted more for you. Your sister." "Don't." The word came out sharp, final. Josie held his gaze for a long moment, then rose. "I'll leave the plate, in case you change your mind." She walked out. Garrett stared at the empty chair across from him, and for a second, just a second, he let himself remember. Sarah, his baby sister, 16 years old when the fever took her. He'd been 300 miles away, fighting a war that meant nothing when he got the letter. She'd called for him, the letter said. At the end, she'd called his name. Garrett closed his eyes. Some wounds never closed. They just learned to bleed quieter. Red Creek Township wasn't much. A general store, a church, a saloon, a handful of houses scattered like afterthoughts along a dusty road. But for Emmeline Crawford, it was the end of the line. She'd arrived 2 years ago with $3 and a carpet bag full of nothing. The Mercers had taken her in, not out of kindness, she learned quickly, but because they needed cheap labor. Room and board in exchange for work. It sounded fair enough. It wasn't. That morning, Emmy woke before dawn as always. Her small room above the stockroom held a narrow bed, a cracked mirror, and a hook for her one spare dress. She splashed water on her face and braided her hair quickly, fingers moving from habit. Downstairs, Mrs. Mercer was already waiting. "You're late." Patience Mercer said, though Emmy was exactly on time. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Sorry, don't stock shelves." The older woman's eyes swept over her with familiar contempt. "And fix your collar. You look slovenly." Emmy adjusted her collar, though nothing was wrong with it. She'd learned not to argue. Arguing made things worse. The morning passed in a blur of sweeping stocking counting. Customers came and went. The women of Red Creek looked through Emmy like she was glass. The men looked at her differently, some with pity, some with something hungrier. Near noon, two women lingered by the fabric bolts, their voices dropping to whispers. "That poor Crawford girl," one said. "No family, no prospects. What kind of life is that?" "The kind that ends badly," the other replied. "Girls without protection don't stay innocent long. It's just nature." Emmy's hand stilled on the shelf. She'd heard worse. She'd heard it all. But today, for some reason, the words cut deeper. She finished stocking and retreated to the back, pressing her palms flat against the wall. "Breathe. Just breathe." "Emmy." The voice came from behind her. Too close. She turned. Horace Mercer stood in the doorway of the stockroom, his bulk blocking the light. He was smiling. That wrong smile. "Yes, sir." Patience went to visit her sister. "Won't be back for hours." He stepped closer. "Thought you and me could have a talk." Emmy's stomach dropped. "I have work to finish, sir." "Work can wait." Another step. "A girl in your position ought to be grateful, Emmy. Ought to show some appreciation." Her back hit the shelf behind her. Nowhere to go. "Mr. Mercer, please." "Please what?" His hand reached out, fingers brushing her sleeve. "I've been patient, more patient than most men would be. But a man's patience has limits." Emmy's heart slammed against her ribs. She could scream. But who would come? Who would believe her over the church deacon, who ever believed girls like her? His hand closed around her wrist. Something inside her snapped. Emmy drove her knee upward hard. Mercer doubled over with a grunt of pain and surprise. In that moment, she ran. She ran through the stockroom, through the back door, out into the blazing June sun. She didn't stop for shoes. She didn't stop for anything. Her bare feet pounded the dust, and behind her, she heard Mercer's voice, furious now, shouting her name. She ran until the town disappeared behind her. Until the only sound was her own ragged breathing and the distant whisper of the creek. The swimming hole lay hidden in a bend of Brazos Creek, shielded by cottonwoods and wild mesquite. Emmy had found it 3 weeks ago, on her one free Sunday. She'd come here twice since then, always before dawn, always alone. Today, she hadn't planned to come. But her feet had carried her here anyway, as if they knew what she needed before her mind did. She stood at the water's edge, gasping, shaking. Tears streamed down her face, the tears she'd held back for 2 years, maybe longer. Her whole body felt dirty. Not from sweat, from the way he'd looked at her. The way they all looked at her. "No one sees me," she thought. "No one really sees me." Without thinking, she pulled at the buttons of her dress. Her fingers trembled, but she kept going. The fabric fell away. Her chemise followed. Until she stood in only her thin cotton shift, the Texas wind warm against her skin. She walked into the water. The cold shocked her at first, then wrapped around her like a blessing. She moved deeper until the water reached her chest. Then she let herself sink. Under the surface, everything went quiet. The voices, the judgment, the hands that reached without permission, all of it faded. There was only the water holding her, washing her clean. When she came up gasping, something had changed. For one perfect moment, she felt free. She floated on her back, staring up at the endless sky. The clouds drifted lazy and slow. The sun warmed her face. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Emmy Crawford let herself just be. She didn't hear the horse. She didn't hear the rider stop at the top of the ridge. She only knew she wasn't alone when a voice, deep, rough, startled, broke the silence. Lord have mercy. Emmy's eyes flew open. She spun in the water, arms wrapping around herself, heart stopping dead in her chest. A man sat on a black stallion at the edge of the trees. Tall, dark-haired, a face like it had been carved from stone. Garrett Sullivan, the coldest man in 3 counties, and he was staring right at her. Garrett had ridden out that morning to clear his head. The conversation with Josie had lodged in his chest like a splinter, and he needed the land to pull it out. The south pasture, the creek boundary, anywhere but that empty house. He hadn't planned to stop at the swimming hole, hadn't planned to see anything at all. But then he'd heard it. Laughter. Soft and bright and completely unexpected. He'd crested the ridge without thinking, and there she was. A woman in the water, floating on her back like she had nowhere else in the world to be. Her hair spread around her like dark silk. Her face turned toward the sky, and on her lips a smile so pure it hit him like a physical blow. He'd said something he didn't even know what, and she'd turned and the smile vanished. Terror replaced it. She scrambled backward in the water, arms wrapping tight around her body. Her shift had gone translucent in the water, clinging to her skin, and Garrett forced his eyes up to her face. He started, then stopped. What was there to say, please? Her voice came out broken. Please don't. I didn't. Garrett dismounted in one swift motion, but instead of moving toward her, he turned his back, completely, facing the opposite direction. Get dressed, he said, his voice rough. I won't look. He heard splashing behind him, heard her stumble out of the water, heard fabric rustling as she pulled on her clothes. His hands clenched at his sides. What the hell was he supposed to do now? I'm dressed. He turned slowly. She stood at the water's edge, barefoot, soaked, clutching her dress closed with both hands. Tears streaked her face. She was shaking so hard he could see it from where he stood. And she was young. Too young for the fear in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know anyone would be here. I didn't mean to trespass. You're on my land, Garrett said. The words came out harsher than he intended. She flinched like he'd struck her. I know. I'm sorry. I'll go. I'll never come back. Just please. Her voice cracked. Please forget this happened. Please don't tell anyone. She was begging. This girl who had done nothing wrong was begging him for mercy. Something twisted in Garrett's chest. Miss, he said, forcing his voice softer. You have my word. I won't speak of this to anyone. She stared at him, disbelief warring with hope. You mean it. I don't give my word lightly. He took a breath. Are you all right? You look like you've been running. Her hand went to her cheek, brushing away tears she seemed surprised to find there. I'm fine. She wasn't. Even he could see that. You're bleeding, he said. She looked down at her feet. Blood seeped from a cut on her sole, bright against her pale skin. She hadn't even noticed. It's nothing. Garrett moved to his saddlebag, pulled out a clean cloth, and walked toward her. She stiffened, stepping back. Easy, he murmured the way he'd talk to a spooked mare. Just a bandage, that's all. He held out the cloth, not touching her. After a long moment, she took it. Thank you. He nodded once. Can you walk? Yes. Where do you live? She hesitated. Something dark flickered in her eyes. The Mercer's store, in town. Garrett knew the Mercers. Everyone did. Horace Mercer was a deacon at the church, well-respected, always the first to offer a handshake and a prayer. His wife was sharp-tongued but considered a pillar of the community. But Garrett had learned long ago that respectability and decency weren't the same thing. You work for them. I live there, in exchange for... She stopped, swallowed. In exchange for work. The way she said it. The way she wouldn't meet his eyes. Did someone hurt you? The question came out before he could stop it. Her head snapped up. For a second he saw everything, the fear, the shame, the fierce, desperate pride holding it all together. No, sir. A lie. He knew it was a lie. But he also knew he couldn't force the truth from her. Not like this. Not when she was standing barefoot and bleeding at the edge of his creek, looking at him like he might be the next person to hurt her. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll believe that. For now." She stared at him confused, like kindness was a language she'd forgotten. "I should go," she whispered. "At least, let me ride you back part way. Your feet." "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. "No, please. If anyone saw me with you—" She shook her head. "I'll be fine. I'm always fine." Garrett didn't argue. But he didn't leave either. He watched her gather herself, watched her straighten her spine, with visible effort, watched her walk away on bleeding feet without looking back. She didn't know he followed at a distance, making sure she reached the town safely. She didn't know he sat on that ridge for a long time afterward, staring at the water where she'd been. She didn't know that something had cracked open inside him, something he'd kept sealed for 15 years. He didn't know it either. Not yet. 3 days passed. Emmy went through the motions of her life, but everything felt wrong. She avoided Mr. Mercer whenever she could, which meant barely sleeping, barely eating, working twice as hard to stay in the main store where customers might see. Mrs. Mercer noticed the change. She said nothing, but her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Emmy knew she was running out of time, and through it all she couldn't stop thinking about him. Garrett Sullivan, the man everyone called Stone, the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and kept his word. He hadn't told anyone. She'd listened for whispers, watched for knowing glances, but there was nothing. He'd kept his promise. Why? On the 4th day, everything changed. Emmy was measuring flour for a customer when the door opened and Garrett Sullivan walked in. The store went silent. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, dark, unreadable. His boots sounded heavy on the wooden floor. Every eye in the place tracked his movement, including hers. Their gazes met. Just for a second. She saw something flicker in his eyes, recognition maybe, or something else she couldn't name. Then he turned to Mrs. Mercer. "Supplies for the Sullivan Ranch," he said, handing over a list. "Of course, Mr. Sullivan." Mrs. Mercer's voice had gone honey-sweet. "Emmeline helped Mr. Sullivan with his order." Emmy's hands trembled as she took the list. She moved through the store gathering items, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. He didn't speak, didn't look at her again, but she felt him there like heat from a fire. When the order was complete, she carried the goods to the counter. Their fingers brushed as he handed over payment. "Thank you, Miss Crawford," he said quietly. The way he said her name, like she was a person, not a servant, like she mattered. "You're welcome, sir." He gathered his supplies and turned to leave. But at the door he paused. "I'm looking for a house manager," he said loud enough for the whole store to hear. "Someone to oversee supplies accounts and household operations at the ranch." Mrs. Mercer straightened. "I might know someone suitable." "I'm asking Miss Crawford." The silence that followed was deafening. Emmy felt the blood drain from her face. Every eye in the store turned to her. Mrs. Mercer's mouth opened, then closed. Mr. Mercer appeared from the back room, his expression darkening. "She's valuable here," Mrs. Mercer said, recovering. "We couldn't possibly. I'll pay triple what you're giving her." Triple. The word hung in the air. Emmy's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. Mrs. Mercer's greed won out over her spite. "Well, if Miss Crawford is agreeable—" "I am." Emmy's voice came out stronger than she expected. "I accept." Garrett nodded once. "Monday morning. I'll send a wagon." He met her eyes again just for a moment. "You'll be safe there." Then he was gone. The store erupted in whispers the moment the door closed behind him. Emmy didn't hear any of it. She was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. The gossip spread through Red Creek like wildfire. By Sunday, everyone had a theory. She seduced him, Lydia Ashford declared at the church gathering. Probably caught him out somewhere and threw herself at him. Poor thing's just desperate, another woman countered. Can you blame her? I can blame her for plenty, Lydia snapped. A decent girl doesn't catch the eye of a man like Stone Sullivan. Whatever she did, it wasn't decent. Inside the church, Emmy sat alone in the back pew. No one sat beside her. No one spoke to her. Even Reverend Whitmore's kind eyes seemed uncertain now. This was supposed to be freedom, she thought. Why does it feel like a different kind of cage? After the service, she tried to slip out quickly. But Clara Finch caught her arm. Clara was 25, married to one of the ranch hands at a nearby spread. Emmy had spoken to her maybe twice in 2 years. Don't listen to them, Clara whispered fiercely. They're just jealous, every last one. Emmy stared at her. Why are you being kind to me? Clara's smile was sad. Because I know what it's like, being the girl everyone talks about. She squeezed Emmy's arm. Sullivan's a hard man, but he's not a cruel one. You'll be all right. Emmy wanted to believe her. She wasn't sure she could. Monday morning came. Emmy stood outside the Mercer's store with her carpetbag, the same one she'd arrived with 2 years ago, watching the road. Mrs. Mercer had barely spoken to her since Friday. Mr. Mercer had watched her with eyes full of cold fury. But neither had tried to stop her. The money Sullivan had promised was too good. Silas Turner arrived with the wagon just after sunrise. Miss Crawford. He tipped his hat. I'm Silas. Boss sent me to bring you home. Home. The word caught in her throat. She climbed into the wagon without looking back. As they rolled out of town, Emmy felt the weight of Red Creek fall away behind her. The whispers, the judgment, the hands that grabbed without asking, all of it growing smaller. But ahead, she saw the Sullivan Ranch rising against the horizon. Grand and powerful, and completely unknown. She was trading one uncertainty for another. And somewhere deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The wagon rolled through the gates of Sullivan Ranch, and Emmy felt her breath catch. She'd heard stories about this place everyone in Red Creek had. But seeing it stretched out before her was something else entirely. Silas glanced over at her. Breathe, miss. It's just a house. It's not just a house, Emmy whispered. He chuckled. No, I reckon it ain't. But the man inside it, he's just a man. Don't let nobody tell you different. Before Emmy could respond, a woman appeared on the porch. Gray-streaked hair pulled back tight. Kind eyes in a weathered face. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward them. You must be Emmeline, she said warmly. I'm Josie. I run this house. Well, I did until you showed up. I don't mean to take your place, ma'am. Josie laughed outright. Child, you ain't taking nothing. You're helping. Lord knows this place needs more hands than I got. She took Emmy's carpetbag before she could protest. Come on, let's get you settled. Emmy followed her inside. The house swallowed her whole, tall ceilings, polished floors, rooms that seemed to go on forever. But Josie moved through it all like it was nothing special. Your room's upstairs, Josie said. Third door on the left. Mr. Sullivan wanted you close to the study so you can handle the accounts. He trusts me with his accounts. Josie stopped and turned. He hired you, didn't he? Garrett Sullivan don't do nothing halfway. If he brought you here, he means for you to stay. The words settled somewhere deep in Emmy's chest. She didn't know what to do with them. Her room was larger than the Mercer's entire stockroom. A real bed with clean linens. A window that looked out over endless land. A small writing desk with paper and ink already laid out. Emmy stood in the middle of it all, afraid to touch anything. It's yours, Josie said softly from the doorway. All of it. Don't matter where you came from. Here you got a place. Emmy's throat tightened. Why is he doing this? That's a question for him, not me. Josie paused. Supper's at 6. Don't be late. He hates late. Then she was gone, and Emmy was alone. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry. Not from sadness. from something she couldn't name, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The first week passed in a blur of learning. Emmy threw herself into the work ledgers, supply orders, household accounts. The numbers made sense to her in a way people never had. She could see where money went, where it came from, how it all fit together. Garrett noticed. "You've balanced 3 months of records in 4 days," he said one evening, standing in the doorway of the study. "My last bookkeeper took twice that long." Emmy looked up from the desk. "Numbers don't lie, sir. They're honest. I like that." Something flickered in his eyes. Most people find ledgers boring. Most people haven't spent 2 years counting other people's flour. She caught herself. "I'm sorry. That was true," he said quietly. "That was true." He walked closer, looking over her shoulder at the open books. She could feel the heat of him behind her, close enough to touch. Her pulse quickened. "You've found the discrepancy," he said. Emmy nodded. "Someone's been skimming from the grain accounts, small amounts spread out, easy to miss if you're not looking." "Who?" "I don't know yet, but I'll find out." Garrett was silent for a long moment. Then, "I believe you will." He left without another word. But that night at supper, he looked at her differently. Not like the frightened girl at the creek, like someone he was beginning to see. 2 weeks in, and the ranch hands had stopped staring. Most of them anyway. Emmy was crossing the yard one afternoon when a voice stopped her cold. "Well, well, the little charity case." She turned. A man leaned against the fence arms, crossed a cruel smile on his face. She didn't recognize him. "Name's Pete Dawkins," he said, pushing off the fence and walking toward her. "I work the south pasture. Heard a lot about you." "I don't know what you've heard." "Oh, I reckon you do." He stepped closer. "Whole town's talking. How you caught the boss's eye. How you got yourself a nice warm bed in the big house." His eyes traveled down her body, slow and deliberate. "Must be real talented." Emmy's hands curled into fists. "Step back." "Or what?" He laughed. "You gonna tell Sullivan? Think he'd believe you over me? I been here 5 years. You been here 5 minutes. I said step back. Make me." A shadow fell across them both. "She don't have to." Dawkins spun around. Silas stood there, arms loose at his sides, but something dangerous lived in his eyes. "This ain't your business, old man," Dawkins spat. "Everything on this ranch is my business." Silas didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You got 3 seconds to apologize to Miss Crawford and get back to work." "I ain't apologizing to no—" "2 seconds." Something in Silas's voice made Dawkins go pale. He looked at Emmy, then back at Silas, then took a step back. "Whatever," he muttered. "Ain't worth my time anyway." He stalked off toward the pasture. Emmy let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said quietly. Silas shook his head. "Don't thank me. That kind of trouble's gonna keep coming. You need to be ready." "Ready how?" He studied her for a moment. "You ever fire a gun?" "No." "You ever ride a horse?" Emmy hesitated. "Once. A long time ago." Silas nodded slowly. "Come to the stable tomorrow. Sunrise. Time you learn to take care of yourself." He walked away before she could argue. That night, Emmy sat at her desk, staring at the wall. Dawkins's words echoed in her head. The whole town's talking. She'd known they would. She'd just hoped a knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Crawford?" Garrett's voice low and rough. She crossed the room and opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still dressed from the day, a strange tension in his shoulders. "Silas told me what happened," he said. "With Dawkins. It was nothing." "Don't." The word came out sharp. "Don't tell me it was nothing. Not when I can see you're still shaking." Emmy looked down at her hands. He was right. She was. "He'll be gone by morning," Garrett continued. "I don't tolerate that kind of behavior on my land." "You don't have to fire him on my account." "I'm not firing him on your account." Garrett's voice softened. I'm firing him because he's wrong, because what he said, what he implied is a lie, and I won't have lies spoken under my roof. Emmy met his eyes. People are going to talk regardless. Let them. It's easy for you to say. You're Garrett Sullivan. Nobody can hurt you. Something shifted in his expression. Something raw and unguarded. You'd be surprised, he said quietly. What can hurt a man? He turned to go, then stopped. Silas is teaching you to ride tomorrow. He mentioned it. Good. Garrett glanced back at her. A woman ought to know how to run if she needs to. But more than that, he paused. She ought to know she doesn't have to. The sunrise lesson became a routine. Every morning before the ranch, Emmy met Silas at the stable. He was a patient teacher, firm, but kind, never raising his voice no matter how many mistakes she made. You're holding the reins too tight, he said one morning. Horse can feel your fear. I'm afraid. I know. He adjusted her grip gently. But you don't gotta let the fear win. Fear's just a feeling. What you do with it, that's what matters. Emmy loosened her hands. The mare beneath her settled. Better, Silas said. Now let's try a trot. By the end of the second week, she could ride without holding on. By the third, she was racing Silas across the east pasture, laughing for the first time in months. You're a natural, Silas told her. Somebody taught you before. Emmy's smile faded. My father, when I was little. Before... She stopped. Silas didn't push. Well, he taught you good. That kind of knowing don't go away. It just waits. That evening, Garrett found her in the stable, brushing down the mare. Silas says you're ready for your own horse, he said. Emmy turned, startled. I can't accept. It's not a gift, it's a necessity. You'll need to ride into town for supplies. Can't do that on a borrowed mount. She searched his face for something she didn't know what. Why are you doing all this? Doing what? The job, the room, the horse, the... She gestured vaguely. Everything. I'm nobody. You don't owe me anything. Garrett stepped closer. You're not nobody. To the rest of the world I am. Then the rest of the world is wrong. The words hung between them. Emmy's heart pounded against her ribs. I saw you, he said, his voice dropping lower. At the creek. Not what you think. I saw someone who'd been pushed to the edge, someone who was drowning not in water, but in everything else. Emmy's breath caught. I know that drowning, Garrett continued. I've lived in it for 15 years, and when I saw you floating there looking at the sky like it was the only safe place left... He stopped, swallowed. I couldn't walk away. Garrett. His name slipped out before she could stop it. First time she'd used it. First time it felt real. His eyes darkened. Don't. Don't what? Don't look at me like that. Like I'm something I'm not. What do you think I see? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked out of the stable, leaving Emmy alone with the horses and the ghost of something neither of them was ready to name. The fourth week brought trouble from an unexpected direction. Emmy was riding back from town when she saw the stranger. He sat on a bay horse at the edge of Sullivan land, watching her approach with eyes that made her skin crawl. Miss Crawford, isn't it? He called out as she drew closer. She pulled her mare to a stop, keeping distance between them. Do I know you? Not yet. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Name's Darren Calhoun. I own the spread east of here. Calhoun. She'd heard the name whispered among the hands. Garrett's rival. The man who'd been trying to buy Sullivan water rights for years. Mr. Sullivan isn't at the ranch right now, Emmy said carefully. If you have business with him... My business isn't with Sullivan. Calhoun nudged his horse closer. It's with you. Emmy's hand tightened on the reins. I don't understand. Word is you're running the books now. Smart girl like you must see a lot of interesting things in those ledgers. I see numbers. Nothing more. Numbers tell stories, Miss Crawford. They show where the money goes, where the weaknesses are. He tilted his head. Sullivan's got weaknesses. Every man does. I just need someone to point them out. Emmy's blood went cold. You're asking me to spy on him. I'm offering you an opportunity. Sullivan took you in, sure, but how long's that gonna last? Men like him get bored. When he does, you'll need somewhere else to go. Calhoun reached into his coat and pulled out a fold of bills. This could be the start of a very profitable friendship. Emmy stared at the money. A month ago, she would have been tempted. A month ago, she had nothing. But that was before. Keep your money, she said, her voice steady, and stay off Sullivan land. Calhoun's smile vanished. You're making a mistake, girl. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. She kicked her mare into a gallop before he could respond, riding hard, until she reached the ranch gates. Her hands were shaking when she dismounted. Her whole body was shaking. Silas met her in the yard, taking one look at her face. What happened? Calhoun. Emmy's voice came out thin. He was waiting for me on the road. Silas's expression went dark. What did he want? Information. About Garrett. About the accounts. She swallowed. He offered me money. What did you say? I told him no. Silas studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Boss needs to know about this. I'll tell him. Tonight. Don't wait. Emmy found Garrett in his study after supper. He looked up when she entered, and something in her expression made him set down his pen immediately. What's wrong? She told him everything. Calhoun's ambush on the road, the offer, the threat beneath the smile. As she spoke, Garrett's face went harder and harder until it looked carved from stone. He touched you. The question came out dangerous. No. He just talked. Talking's enough. Garrett stood moving toward the window. His hands were clenched at his sides. Calhoun's been circling this land like a vulture for years. I knew he was getting desperate. I didn't know he'd stoop to using you. He didn't use me. I said no. Garrett turned. You could have said yes, taken his money and disappeared. Nobody would have blamed you. I'm not nobody, Emmy said quietly. You told me that yourself. Something broke open in his expression. Something raw and wounded and full of a longing he couldn't hide. Emmy. I'm not going anywhere, Garrett. She stepped closer. This is my home now. The first real home I've ever had. And I'll be damned if I let Darren Calhoun or anyone else take that from me. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt thick, electric. Then Garrett crossed the distance in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything so simple. He just held her, his face buried in her hair, his arms wrapped around her like she was something precious. Something he was terrified of losing. I won't let anyone hurt you, he murmured against her temple. I swear it. Emmy closed her eyes and let herself be held. For the first time in her life, she believed someone meant it. But she knew even as she stood there in his arms that promises couldn't stop what was coming. Calhoun wasn't a man who took rejection well. The storm was just beginning. A week later, the first shots were fired. Emmy was in the study when she heard the commotion, shouting voices, running feet, a horse screaming. She ran to the window and saw chaos in the yard below. Silas was on the ground, blood soaked through his shirt. She was down the stairs before she knew she was moving, pushing through the cluster of men, dropping to her knees beside him. Silas. His eyes were open but unfocused. Ambush, he managed. South fence. 3 men. Didn't see him coming. Don't talk. Save your strength. Emmy pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Someone get Josie. Get bandages. Garrett appeared beside her, his face white with fury. Who did this? Didn't see faces, Silas said. But I saw the brand on one of the horses. C-bar C. Calhoun's brand. Garrett stood slowly. When Emmy looked up at him, she saw something terrifying in his eyes. Not anger. Something colder. Something final. "Garrett, don't—" "Stay with him," Garrett said. His voice was flat. Dead. "Keep him alive." "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. He was already walking toward the stable, already calling for his horse. "Garrett." He didn't look back. Emmy watched him ride out, disappearing into the dust, and felt something cold wrap around her heart. She'd seen that look before on the faces of men who didn't expect to come home. "Miss Emmy." Silas's hand found hers weak, but insistent. "Don't let him do something stupid." "How am I supposed to stop him?" "You're the only one who can." The words hit her like a physical blow. She looked down at Silas, then back at the empty road, then made a decision. "Josie!" she shouted. "I need a horse. Now!" 5 minutes later, she was riding hard toward Calhoun's spread, praying she wasn't already too late. The Calhoun ranch rose up from the plain like a challenge. Smaller than Sullivan's, but meaner somehow. The men who worked there watched Emmy approach with hostile eyes. She found Garrett in the front yard face to face with Darren Calhoun. Both men had guns at their hips. Neither had drawn. Yet. "Think you can ride onto my land and accuse me," Calhoun was saying. "I had nothing to do with your man getting shot." "3 riders with your brand," Garrett said, voice like ice. "Your horses, your bullets, your war." "It ain't my war, not yet," Calhoun smiled. "But it could be. Real easy. All you gotta do is keep pushing." "Garrett." Emmy's voice cut through the tension. Both men turned. Calhoun's smile widened. "Well, well. The little spy who wasn't." "Shut up." Emmy dismounted and walked toward them, ignoring the guns, ignoring the danger. "Garrett, Silas is alive. He's gonna make it. But he needs you there, not here. This man tried to kill him. This man wants you to do something stupid. Don't give him the satisfaction." Garrett's jaw tightened. "He shot my foreman. And if you shoot him, what happens? You hang. The ranch goes to auction. Calhoun wins anyway." Emmy stepped between them, putting herself directly in the line of fire. "Is that what you want, to give him everything? Get out of the way, Emmy." "No." The word hung in the air. Calhoun watched with undisguised amusement. "Quite a woman you've got there, Sullivan," he drawled. "Be ashamed to lose her in the crossfire." Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. Emmy grabbed his arm. "Look at me." He didn't. "Garrett Sullivan, look at me." Finally, slowly, his eyes met hers. The rage was still there, burning cold. But beneath it, she saw something else. Something human. Something afraid. "He doesn't get to win," she said softly. "Not like this. Not because of me." A muscle twitched in Garrett's jaw. His hand fell away from his gun. "This isn't over," he said to Calhoun, his voice rough with suppressed fury. "You come near my land again, near my people, I won't need a gun to end you." Calhoun's smile flickered. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. Garrett turned, took Emmy's arm, and walked her back to the horses. He helped her mount, then swung onto his own horse, and together they rode away. Neither spoke until they were a mile from Calhoun's spread. Then Garrett said quietly, "You shouldn't have come." "You're welcome." "I could have gotten you killed." "You could have gotten yourself killed, which would have been considerably worse." He glanced at her. "Worse how?" Emmy met his eyes. "Because then I'd be alone again. And I've been alone long enough." The words hit him like bullets. She saw it in the way his whole body tensed, the way his breath caught. "Emmy." "Don't," she said. "Not yet. We've got a wounded man to tend and a ranch to protect. There's time for the rest later." She kicked her horse into a gallop, leaving him to follow. And as she rode toward home, because it was home now, truly home, Emmy Crawford made herself a promise. No more running, no more hiding. Whatever came next, she would face it standing up. even if it meant facing her own heart. Silas survived. The bullet had missed anything vital, but just barely. Josie stayed by his bedside for 3 days straight, changing bandages, forcing broth down his throat, praying when she thought no one was watching. Emmy divided her time between the sick room and the study, keeping the ranch running, while Garrett prowled the property like a caged animal. He barely slept, barely ate. Every time a rider appeared on the horizon, his hand went to his gun. On the 4th day, Silas finally opened his eyes properly. "You look terrible," he said to Garrett, who was sitting in the chair beside him. "You got shot. And you look like you ain't slept since." Silas tried to sit up, winced, and thought better of it. "What'd I miss?" "Nothing. Emmy's been handling the accounts. The men are watching the borders. Calhoun hasn't moved." "He will." Silas's voice was rough, but certain. "Man like that don't back down. He's waiting for something." "Let him wait. I'll be ready." Silas studied him for a long moment. "That girl saved your life, you know." Garrett's jaw tightened. "I know." "You gonna do something about it?" "About what?" "Don't play stupid with me, boy. I've been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. She looks at you like you hung the moon. And you—" Silas coughed, then continued. "You look at her like she's the first sunrise you ever really saw." Garrett stood abruptly, walking to the window. "It's complicated. Love always is." "I didn't say love. You didn't have to." Silence stretched between them. Outside, Emmy's voice carried across the yard, giving instructions to one of the hands. Clear, confident, nothing like the terrified girl at the creek. "She deserves better than me," Garrett said finally. "Better than this life." "Maybe," Silas replied. "But that ain't your choice to make. It's hers." Emmy found Garrett in the stable that evening, brushing down his horse with slow mechanical strokes. She'd learned to read his moods over the past weeks. This one was dark. "Silas is asking for soup," she said. "Josie's threatening to tie him to the bed if he doesn't rest." Garrett didn't look up. "Sounds about right." Emmy moved closer. "You haven't eaten since yesterday." "Not hungry." "Garrett." He stopped brushing. His shoulders tensed. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't come in here being kind. Don't look at me like I'm worth saving." He turned finally, and the raw pain in his eyes made her breath catch. "I almost got you killed. Riding to Calhoun's like some damn fool, not thinking about anyone but myself." "You were thinking about Silas." "I was thinking about revenge." "There's a difference." Emmy stepped closer. "You stopped. When I asked you to, you stopped. Because you put yourself between two loaded guns." His voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? Seeing you there, knowing one wrong move and—" He couldn't finish. Emmy reached out and took his hand. "I'm still here. This time." He gripped her fingers like she might disappear. "But Calhoun isn't done. He's going to keep pushing until something breaks. And when it does, then we'll face it together." Garrett looked at her, really looked, and Emmy saw the walls around his heart beginning to crack. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you stay? You could go anywhere. Start over somewhere nobody knows your name. Why here? Why me?" Emmy lifted her free hand to his face. "Because you saw me. Not what everyone said about me. Not what they wanted me to be. You just saw me. Emmy. And because I see you too." Her voice softened. The man behind the stone, the one who's been alone so long he forgot what it feels like to let someone in. Garrett closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Something had broken free. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be anything but what I am." "Then be what you are. I'm not asking for anything else." He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, feeling the same heartbeat. "If I kiss you," he said quietly, "everything changes." "Everything's already changed." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry, and full of everything they'd both been holding back. Emmy grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. He lifted her off her feet, one hand in her hair, the other pressed against the small of her back. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Emmy laughed. Actually laughed. "What?" Garrett asked, confused. "Nothing." She touched his face. "I just never thought. I never imagined anyone would what? Want me. Not just want something from me, but actually want me." Garrett's expression went fierce. "I want you. Every stubborn, brave, infuriating inch of you." Emmy kissed him again, softer this time. "Then you've got me." News traveled fast in ranch country. By the end of the week, every hand on Sullivan property knew something had changed between the boss and the house manager. Most of them approved. Emmy had earned their respect the way she'd ridden to Calhoun's, the way she'd stood up to protect Garrett and Silas both. Clara Finch rode out from her husband's spread to visit, barely containing her excitement. "I knew it," she said, grabbing Emmy's hands. "The moment I saw him look at you in church, I knew." "He's never been to church." "He was that Sunday you came back from his place, stood in the back, the whole service watching you like a hawk." Clara grinned. "Half the women in town nearly fainted from shock. The other half wanted to scratch your eyes out." Emmy felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He never told me that." "Of course he didn't. Man's got the emotional vocabulary of a fence post." Clara squeezed her hands. "But he showed up. For you. That's what matters." That night, Emmy asked Garrett about it. "You came to church." He didn't look up from his ledger. "Who told you that?" "Clara Finch." "Woman talks too much." "Garrett." He sighed, setting down his pen. "I wanted to make sure you were all right. After everything that happened, I just..." He shrugged. "I needed to see you." "You could have talked to me." "In front of the whole town." He shook his head. "They were already saying enough. I didn't want to make it worse." Emmy crossed the room and sat on the edge of his desk. "You were protecting me." "I was trying to. By standing in the back of a church you never attend, watching me from across the room." "It sounds foolish when you say it like that." "It sounds sweet." She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Foolish and sweet." Garrett pulled her into his lap. "You're going to be the death of me, woman." "Probably." She smiled against his lips. "But at least you won't die bored." The peace lasted 3 more days. Emmy was in the study when Josie burst through the door, face pale. "Men at the gate. Calhoun's men. 6 of them." Emmy was on her feet instantly. "Where's Garrett?" "South pasture with the herd. Too far to reach in time." Emmy's mind raced. 6 armed men. Silas still recovering. Garrett miles away. "Get the hands," she said. "Everyone who can hold a gun. Now." She grabbed Garrett's rifle from the cabinet and walked out to meet them. The leader was a big man with a scarred face and cold eyes. He smiled when he saw Emmy step onto the porch. "Well now, Sullivan sends a woman to fight his battles." "Sullivan isn't here." Emmy kept her voice steady. "State your business and leave." "Our business is with the boss. Tell him Calhoun's done waiting. He's got 1 week to sign over the water rights or we start burning." "Burning what?" "Everything." The man's smile widened. "Starting with the pretty little house manager." Emmy raised the rifle. "Get off this property." "Or what? You gonna shoot all 6 of us?" "No." A voice came from behind her. "But I will." Silas stepped onto the porch, pale and unsteady, but armed. Behind him, 4 ranch hands emerged with weapons drawn. The scarred man's smile faded. "You got 1 week," he said. "Tell Sullivan." They turned and rode away. Emmy didn't lower the rifle until they disappeared over the horizon. Then her knees gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy," he said. "It's over." "It's not over." Emmy's voice shook. "It's just beginning." Garrett returned to find his ranch on high alert, and Emmy sitting in the study still holding his rifle. "What happened?" She told him. His expression grew darker with every word. "He threatened you. He threatened all of us. He threatened you." Emmy stood and walked toward him. "Garrett, listen to me. We can't fight this alone. Calhoun has men-money connections. If we go to war with him, then we go to war. We'll lose. I don't lose. Everyone loses eventually." She grabbed his arm. "There has to be another way. The law, the territorial marshal, something." Garrett laughed bitterly. "The law, Calhoun owns half the judges in this territory. The marshal's been in his pocket for years. Then we find someone he doesn't own. There is no one." Emmy's mind worked furiously, and then it hit her. "The railroad." Garrett frowned. "What? The railroad's coming through next year. I've seen the surveys in your accounts. They want to buy right-of-way access through Sullivan Land. So Calhoun's land is worthless without water rights. But if the railroad comes through yours instead of his, he loses everything. Not just the water, his whole operation becomes obsolete." Garrett stared at her. "You want to bankrupt him. I want to make him irrelevant." Emmy's eyes blazed. "You said it yourself. Calhoun owns the law around here, but he doesn't own the railroad. He doesn't own progress." For a long moment, Garrett said nothing. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. "You're brilliant." "I know." He pulled her close. "And terrifying. Also true. I love you." The words fell between them unexpected and enormous. Emmy went still. "What did you say?" Garrett's eyes held hers. "I love you. I've been trying not to. Trying to protect you from me, from this life, from everything. But I can't anymore." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Emmeline Crawford, and I'm done pretending I don't." Emmy felt tears spill down her cheeks. Not sad tears. Something else entirely. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since the creek. Since you turned away and let me dress. Since you kept your word when you had no reason to." Garrett kissed her long and deep, and when they broke apart, both of them were trembling. "Marry me," he said. Emmy laughed. "What?" "Marry me. Tomorrow. Today. Right now if we can find a preacher." Garrett. "I know it's fast. I know there's a war coming. But if something happens, if Calhoun—" He stopped, swallowed. "I don't want to die without making you mine. Not in some secret way. Real. Legal. Forever." Emmy looked at him, this man who'd been stoned for so long, cracking open in front of her. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." She kissed him again. "But not today. Not with Calhoun's threat hanging over us. When we do this, I want it to be a beginning, not a goodbye." Garrett nodded slowly. "When this is over, then." "When this is over." They held each other in the gathering darkness, two people who'd been alone their whole lives, finally finding something worth fighting for. The next morning, Emmy sent a letter to the railroad company. 2 days later, a response came. "They want to meet," she told Garrett, barely containing her excitement. "In person, next week." "Where?" "Austin. They're sending a representative to discuss terms." Garrett read the letter twice. This could work. This could actually work. "I know. If we secure the railroad contract before Calhoun makes his move, he loses his leverage, completely." Garrett looked at her with something like awe. "How did you even think of this?" Emmy smiled. "Desperation breeds creativity." He pulled her close. "I'm sending men with you. Armed men." Garrett. Not negotiable. Calhoun knows we're planning something. The moment you leave this ranch, you become a target. Emmy nodded slowly. Fine. But I'm coming back. No matter what happens, I'm coming back to you. You'd better. He kissed her forehead. Because if you don't, I'll burn down the whole territory looking for you. Romantic. Practical. He held her tighter. I just found you. I'm not losing you now. The morning Emmy left for Austin, the whole ranch turned out to see her off. Silas, still moving carefully, but upright, handed her a small pistol. Keep this on you, hidden, just in case. Josie pressed a bundle of food into her hands. You eat something. You're too thin. Clara, who'd ridden over at dawn, hugged her fiercely. You come back to us here. Emmy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. And then there was Garrett. He stood by the wagon, hat in hand, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. I could still come with you, he said quietly. Let Silas handle. Silas is still recovering. The ranch needs you here. Emmy touched his face. I'll be back in 5 days, maybe less. 5 days too long. I know. He kissed her, not caring who watched. When they broke apart, his eyes were fierce. If anything feels wrong, anything, you turn around and come home. Promise me. I promise. Emmy climbed into the wagon, flanked by 2 armed hands. As they rolled toward the gate, she looked back one last time. Garrett stood watching his figure growing smaller against the endless sky. She didn't know it would be the last time she saw the ranch like this. She didn't know what was waiting for her in Austin. And she didn't know that Calhoun had already made his move. The first day on the road passed without incident. Emmy kept her eyes on the horizon, watching for trouble, but none came. The 2 hands Garrett had sent Tom and Jake rode alert and ready, hands never far from their weapons. By nightfall, they'd made camp near a small creek. Emmy couldn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like a threat. You should rest, Miss Emmy, Tom said, poking at the fire. Long day tomorrow. I know. She shook her head. Something feels wrong. Tom and Jake exchanged glances. Calhoun's got no reason to move on us out here, Jake said. He don't know about the railroad meeting. Doesn't he? The question hung in the air. Emmy pulled her shawl tighter and stared into the flames. By morning, her unease had only grown. They rode hard through the second day, pushing the horses faster than strictly necessary. Emmy couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time she looked back, she saw nothing. But the feeling persisted. We're making good time, Tom said around midday. Should reach Austin by tomorrow evening. Good. You all right, miss? Fine. She wasn't, but saying it out loud would only make it worse. That night they stopped at a small way station. A handful of travelers passed through, none of them remarkable. Emmy forced herself to eat, forced herself to sleep. She dreamed of fire. The third morning dawned gray and heavy. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. We should push through, Emmy said. Get to Austin before it breaks. Tom nodded. Agreed, let's move. They were 2 hours from the city when it happened. A shot cracked through the air. Tom jerked backward, blood blooming across his chest. Ambush! Jake shouted, wheeling his horse. Another shot. Jake fell. Emmy screamed. She grabbed for the reins, tried to run, but hands were already reaching for her. Rough hands. Cruel hands. She was dragged from the saddle. Her head hit the ground hard. Stars exploded behind her eyes. Well, well. A familiar voice. Scarred face from the ranch. Look what we caught. Emmy kicked out, connecting with something soft. A grunt of pain. Then a fist slammed into her jaw and everything went black. She woke in darkness. Her hands were bound. Her head throbbed. Every breath sent pain shooting through her ribs. Slowly, Emmy forced her eyes open. She was in some kind of cellar. Stone walls, dirt floor. A single lamp flickered in the corner. Awake at last! Darren Calhoun stepped into the light. He was smiling. I have to admit, he said, pulling up a chair and sitting across from her. I underestimated you. A railroad deal. Clever, very clever. Emmy's throat was dry. How did I know? He laughed. You think you're the only one who can read mail? I've had eyes on Sullivan's place for weeks. The moment that letter arrived from the railroad company, I knew what you were planning. Emmy's blood ran cold. So I made some arrangements. Calhoun leaned forward. Your men are dead. The railroad representative has been detained. And by the time Sullivan realizes what's happened, he spread his hands. It'll be too late. He'll come for me. I'm counting on it. Calhoun's smile widened. That's the beauty of this, Miss Crawford. You're not the prize. You're the bait. Emmy's heart pounded. You want to kill him. I want to destroy him. There's a difference. Calhoun stood pacing slowly. Sullivan's been a thorn in my side for 10 years, but I could never get to him directly. Too many men, too much land, too damn stubborn to break. He stopped in front of her, crouching down to eye level. But you're his weakness. The first one he's ever had. Calhoun reached out and touched her cheek. Emmy jerked away. When he comes for you, and he will, I'll be waiting. And when I put a bullet in his heart, I want him to know that it was all because of you. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. Calhoun straightened. You just happened to get in the way. He walked toward the door, then paused. Get comfortable, Miss Crawford. It might be a while. The door slammed shut. Emmy heard the lock click into place, and then she was alone. Back at the ranch, Garrett felt it before he knew it. He was in the study going over the patrol schedules when a cold dread settled into his bones. He looked up, frowning. Josie. She appeared in the doorway. Sir? When was Emmy supposed to reach Austin? Yesterday evening by the schedule. Yesterday. A full day ago. Has there been any word, a telegram, anything? Josie's face paled. Nothing, sir. I assumed. Garrett was already moving. He strode to the telegraph office in town, ignoring the whispers that followed him. The operator looked up nervously. Any messages from Austin? For Sullivan. No, sir. Nothing's come through. Garrett's hands clenched. Send a wire to the Driscoll Hotel. Ask if a Miss Emmeline Crawford has arrived. The response came back within the hour. No record of arrival. No reservation under that name. Garrett read it twice, 3 times. Then he walked outside and screamed. Silas found him saddling Shadow Hands, shaking with barely contained rage. What happened? She's gone. Garrett's voice was barely human. She never reached Austin. Calhoun took her. You don't know that for certain. I know. Garrett mounted. I know because this is exactly what he'd do. Use her to get to me, break me before he kills me. Then we gather the men, ride together. There's no time. Garrett wheeled Shadow toward the gate. Every minute I waste is a minute he has her, a minute he could be. He couldn't finish the sentence. Silas grabbed the bridle. You ride in there alone, you die. And then she dies too. Is that what you want? Garrett's jaw clenched. I can't just... You can. You will. Silas's voice was iron. Give me 2 hours. 2 hours to gather every man who can ride. Then we go together. We bring her home. For a long moment, Garrett didn't move. Then slowly he dismounted. 2 hours, he said. Not a minute more. That's all I need. Emmy tested her bonds for the 100th time. The rope was tight, but not impossible. If she could just find something sharp. The door opened. She went still. A woman entered carrying a tray of food, older, worn-looking with eyes that wouldn't meet Emmy's. "I brought you something to eat," she said quietly. "Mr. Calhoun said, 'You work for him.'" The woman flinched. "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Silence. The woman set down the tray and turned to leave. "Wait." Emmy's voice softened. "Please, what's your name?" A pause. "Martha." "Martha, I need you to listen to me. The man who took me, Calhoun, he's going to kill people. Good people. People who've never done anything to him except stand in his way." Martha's hands twisted in her apron. "I know you're afraid," Emmy continued. "I know he probably threatens you. But if there's any way at all that you could help me, I can't." The words came out strangled. "He'd kill me. He's going to kill me anyway, and the man I love, and anyone else who gets in his way." Emmy leaned forward. "Is that the kind of man you want to spend your life serving?" Martha's eyes finally met hers. Emmy saw tears there, fear, and something else, something that looked like hope. "There's a loose stone," Martha whispered. "In the corner. Behind it there's a drainage tunnel. It leads to the creek." Emmy's heart leaped. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just go." Martha glanced toward the door. "And don't look back." She left without another word. Emmy waited until the footsteps faded. Then she moved. The rope took another 10 minutes to work loose. Her wrists were raw and bleeding by the time she got free, but she barely noticed. She crawled to the corner Martha had indicated, feeling along the stones. There. One moved. She pulled it free, then another, then another. Behind them, a narrow passage opened into darkness. Emmy didn't hesitate. She squeezed through. The tunnel was tight, so tight she could barely breathe. Dirt scraped against her skin, roots caught in her hair. She crawled forward inch by inch, terror clawing at her chest. And then she heard the water. The tunnel opened onto a shallow creek. Emmy pulled herself out, gasping, trembling, alive. She was free, but she wasn't safe. Not yet. Emmy ran. Barefoot, bleeding, half-blind with exhaustion, she ran. The creek led to a road. The road led to open country. She had no idea where she was, no idea how far from Austin or from home. All she knew was that she had to keep moving. Dawn was breaking when she heard hoofbeats. Emmy stumbled to a stop, heart hammering. She looked for cover, for a weapon, for anything. Emmy. That voice. She knew that voice. Garrett appeared over the ridge shadow at full gallop. Behind him, a dozen men rode hard. Emmy's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, sobbing. Garrett was off his horse before it stopped moving. He gathered her into his arms, holding her so tight it hurt. "I found you," he breathed. "God, I found you." "Calhoun, he's waiting, it's a trap." "I know." Garrett pulled back, looking at her. His eyes were wild. "I know everything." One of his men talked. Silas made him talk. Emmy touched his face. "You came." "Of course I came. I will always come for you." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Always." "We have to stop him. He's not going to do anything." Garrett's voice went cold. "Not anymore." Silas rode up beside them. "Boss, we got company." Emmy looked up. On the ridge behind them, a line of riders had appeared. Calhoun's men, and at the center, Calhoun himself. "Well now," Calhoun called down. "Isn't this touching?" Garrett rose slowly, putting Emmy behind him. "Let her go, Calhoun. This is between us." "Oh, I know it is. Always has been." Calhoun smiled. "But she's made it so much more entertaining. She's got nothing to do with this. She's got everything to do with this." Calhoun nudged his horse forward. 10 years ago, you outbid me for the Riverland. Took the one piece of property that would have made my operation profitable. You didn't need it. You had plenty. But you took it anyway just to prove you could. That was business. That was war. You just didn't know it yet. Calhoun drew his pistol. Now here's how this is going to work. You're going to sign over the water rights, all of them, and then you're going to walk away from this territory and never come back. And if I don't, Calhoun aimed at Emmy, then she dies. Right here, right now. Emmy felt the world narrow to that single dark eye of the gun barrel. Garrett didn't move. You shoot her, and my men will cut you down before you can reload. Maybe. But she'll still be dead. Calhoun's smile turned cruel. Funny thing about love, it makes men stupid. And right now, Sullivan, you're the stupidest man in Texas. The silence stretched. Emmy could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Garrett's breathing, could feel the tension vibrating through every man on both sides. Then Garrett spoke. You're right, he said quietly. Love does make men stupid. He stepped aside. Emmy stared at him in horror. Garrett? But it also makes them brave. Garrett's hand moved faster than thought, and his gun was in his hand, aimed dead at Calhoun's chest. And I'm done being afraid. The shot that rang out wasn't his. It came from behind Calhoun, a single crack that echoed across the valley. Calhoun's eyes went wide. He looked down at the red bloom spreading across his chest. What? Another shot. Calhoun fell from his horse. Behind him, Martha stood with a smoking rifle in her hands. I made my choice, she said. Chaos erupted. Calhoun's men scattered, some fighting, some fleeing. Sullivan's riders charged into the fray. Gunfire crackled through the morning air. But Emmy saw none of it. She saw only Garrett crossing the distance between them, pulling her close. It's over, he said. It's finally over. Emmy buried her face in his chest and let herself believe it. The battle ended as quickly as it began. With their leader dead, Calhoun's men had no stomach for a fight. Most surrendered. A few escaped into the hills. Silas wrote up a cut on his forehead, but otherwise unharmed. What do you want us to do with the prisoners, boss? Turn them over to the marshal in Austin. The real one, not Calhoun's puppet. Garrett's voice was tired. It's time this territory had some actual law. And the woman? The one who shot Calhoun. Emmy stepped forward. She saved my life. Twice. Garrett looked at Martha, who stood apart from the others, still holding the rifle, like she wasn't sure what to do with it. Bring her to the ranch, he said. She's got a place there if she wants it. Martha's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, unable to speak. The ride back to Sullivan Ranch took 2 days. Emmy spent most of it in the wagon, too exhausted to sit a horse. Garrett rode beside her the entire way. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. When the ranch finally came into view, Emmy felt something shift inside her, the last of the fear, the last of the doubt. It all fell away. She was home. Josie met them at the gate, crying openly. Thank God you're safe. Clara rode up an hour later, alerted by word of mouth. She hugged Emmy so hard it hurt. Don't you ever scare me like that again, she said fiercely. You hear me? Never again. I hear you. That night, Emmy and Garrett sat on the porch watching the stars come out. The ranch was quiet. The men were celebrating in the bunkhouse. Josie and Martha were in the kitchen, already working together like old friends. I meant what I said, Garrett murmured. Before you left. Emmy leaned against his shoulder. Which part? The marriage part. He turned to look at her. I know things are different now. I know you might need time. I don't need time. Emmy took his hand. I need you. Emmy. I spent my whole life waiting for something good to happen, waiting for someone to see me, waiting for a home that felt like mine. She lifted his hand to her lips. I'm done waiting. Garrett's eyes searched hers. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her, then soft and slow and full of promise. Next week, he said against her lips. We'll do it next week. Give Josie time to cook something proper. Invite the whole county. The whole county hates me. The whole county can learn to love you. Or they can stay home. He smiled a real smile, the kind she rarely saw. Either way, you'll be my wife. My wife. The words wrapped around Emmy like a blessing. Say it again, she whispered. My wife. Another kiss. Mine. Emmy closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The safety, the belonging, the love she'd never believed she deserved. She was still scared, still uncertain about the future, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing it alone. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Josie took charge like a general commanding an army, directing Martha and the ranch hands with equal parts warmth and iron will. Emmy tried to help, but Josie shooed her away at every turn. This is your wedding, she said firmly. You don't cook for your own wedding. You rest. You get beautiful. You let us handle the rest. Emmy didn't know how to rest. She'd never had that luxury. So instead, she walked. Through the house that was becoming hers. Through the land that would bear her name. Through the life she still couldn't quite believe was real. Garrett found her by the creek one afternoon, standing at the water's edge. Thought I might find you here, he said quietly. Emmy didn't turn. This is where it all started. Seems fitting to come back. He moved to stand beside her, having second thoughts. No. She finally looked at him. Just trying to remember who I was before. The girl who came here thinking freedom was just a pretty dream. And now I know it's not a dream. It's a choice. Emmy took his hand. I choose this. I choose you. Garrett pulled her close. 3 more days. 3 more days. Think you can wait that long? Emmy laughed. I've waited my whole life. 3 days is nothing. But the next morning brought trouble none of them expected. Emmy was in the study when Silas burst through the door. We got company. A lot of company. Emmy followed him to the porch. Her heart stopped. A carriage had pulled up to the gate. Not just any carriage. The kind that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. And behind it, a line of riders in formal dress. Who? Emmy started. The railroad, Silas said grimly. And they brought lawyers. Emmy's stomach dropped. Garrett appeared beside her, his expression hard. What do they want? Reckon we're about to find out. The lead rider dismounted. A tall man with silver hair and cold eyes. He looked at the house, at the land, at Emmy, with the calculating gaze of someone used to owning things. Mr. Sullivan. His voice carried like a whip. I'm Theodore Harrington, president of the Texas Pacific Railway. We need to talk. The meeting took place in Garrett's study. Emmy insisted on being present. Harrington's eyebrows rose at that, but he said nothing. Let me be direct, Harrington said, settling into a chair like he owned it. We've acquired Calhoun's holdings, all of them, including his water rights claims. Emmy felt the blood drain from her face. Those claims are worthless, Garrett said flatly. Calhoun's dead, his operation's finished. His operation, yes, but his debts? Harrington smiled. Those transferred to us, including the original survey that shows the creek running through disputed territory. That survey's wrong. Perhaps, but proving it will take years. Years of litigation, years of uncertainty. Harrington leaned forward. Or we could make this simple. Sell us the water rights. Fair price, clean transaction. Everyone walks away happy. Emmy's hands clenched in her lap. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything. And if I refuse, Garrett asked, then we tie up your property in court until you're too broke to fight. We've done it before. Harrington shrugged. Nothing personal, Sullivan. Just business. Emmy stood abruptly. Both men turned. May I see the survey? She asked. Harrington's smile turned condescending. This is a matter for the men to discuss, Miss. Crawford, soon to be Sullivan. Emmy held out her hand. The survey. Please. Something in her voice made Harrington pause. He glanced at Garrett, who nodded once. Let her see it. Emmy took the document and studied it carefully. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was clear. 2 years of keeping the Mercers' books, weeks of managing Sullivan accounts. She knew numbers, she knew records, and she knew something was wrong. This date, she said, pointing, 1869, but this section of land wasn't surveyed until 1871. I've seen the territorial records. Harrington's smile flickered. A clerical error. And this signature. Emmy's voice grew stronger. Thomas Whitfield. He was the county surveyor in 69. But he died in 68. Cholera epidemic. I remember because my parents... She stopped, swallowed. My parents nursed him before they caught it themselves. Silence fell. This survey is forged, Emmy said. And if I can prove my parents were there when Whitfield died, your whole claim falls apart. Harrington's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Emmy set the survey down. I grew up in Red Creek, Mr. Harrington. I know every grave in that cemetery, every date on every headstone. And I know that you're trying to steal land with a document that's worth less than the paper it's printed on. Garrett looked at her with something like awe. Harrington stood abruptly. This isn't over. Yes, Emmy said quietly. It is. The railroad men left within the hour. Emmy watched them go from the porch, her whole body trembling. Garrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. How did you know? He asked. About the surveyor. I didn't. Not for certain. Emmy leaned back against him. But I knew the dates didn't match, and I knew men like Harrington expect women to stay quiet. That's their weakness. Garrett laughed a real full laugh. You're magnificent. I'm tired. She turned in his arms. And I want to get married before anyone else tries to take what's ours. 2 more days. 2 more days. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Emmy woke early, nerves jangling, and found Josie already waiting with a dress she'd never seen before. Where did this come from? Emmy touched the delicate fabric, eyes wide. Garrett had it made, months ago before any of this started. Josie's eyes were suspiciously bright. He knew, child. Even then he knew. Emmy couldn't speak. She just held the dress against her chest and cried. Clara arrived at noon full of excitement and barely contained chaos. Half the county's coming, she said, helping Emmy with her hair. The other half's pretending they weren't invited. But everyone wants to see Stone Sullivan finally take a wife. They want to see me, Emmy corrected quietly. The girl who caught him. They want to see a woman who stood up to railroad men and won. Clara met her eyes in the mirror. That's what they're saying now. Not the old gossip. This. Emmy swallowed. Really? Really? Clara squeezed her shoulder. You changed the story, Emmy. You wrote your own ending. The ceremony took place at sunset. Emmy walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. No family to stand beside her. Just her own 2 feet carrying her forward. But she wasn't alone. Not really. Silas stood at Garrett's right hand, recovered and strong. Martha sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Clara and her husband watched from nearby. Josie clutched a handkerchief like her life depended on it. And at the altar, Garrett waited. He looked different today. Not the hard man everyone feared, not the stone they whispered about. He looked like someone who'd finally found what he was looking for. Emmy reached him. He took her hands. You came, he said softly. Always. Reverend Whitmore cleared his throat. Dearly beloved. Wait. Garrett's voice cut through. The Reverend stopped, confused. Emmy's heart lurched. What is it? Garrett turned to face the assembled crowd. Before we do this, there's something I need to say. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Emmy gripped his hands tighter. Most of you know me, Garrett continued. Some of you fear me. A few of you might even hate me. He paused. I've earned that. I spent years building walls, pushing people away, making sure nobody could ever hurt me again. Emmy felt tears prick her eyes. And then I found her. Garrett's voice softened. Not looking for her. Not expecting her. Just found her in a place she had every right to be, being exactly who she was. He turned back to Emmy. I didn't save you, he said. You saved yourself. You saved this ranch. You saved me from spending the rest of my life alone, and too proud to admit I was lonely. He cupped her face in his hands. So before God and everyone here, I want to say thank you. For choosing me. For staying. For being braver than anyone I've ever known. Emmy was crying now. She didn't care. Garrett Sullivan, she whispered. Just marry me already. He laughed. The crowd laughed. And Reverend Whitmore, wiping his own eyes, finally finished the ceremony. I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride. Garrett kissed her like the world was ending. Or maybe like it was just beginning. The celebration lasted until midnight. Emmy danced until her feet ached. She laughed until her cheeks hurt. She accepted congratulations from people who'd once whispered behind her back, and she found she didn't hold it against them. People could change. She was proof of that. Near the end of the night, she slipped away to the porch for a moment of quiet. The noise of the party faded behind her. The stars spread out above like a blessing. Running away already? Garrett's voice came from the shadows. Emmy smiled. Never. Just catching my breath. He moved to stand beside her. Big day. The biggest. She leaned into him. I keep waiting to wake up, to find out this was all a dream. It's not a dream. Garrett kissed the top of her head. It's better. Dreams end. This doesn't. They stood in silence watching the night. What happens now? Emmy asked finally. Now we live. Build something real. Maybe... He hesitated. Maybe a family. Someday, if you want. Emmy's heart swelled. I want. Yeah. A whole houseful. She turned to look at him. Children who never have to wonder if they're loved. Who never have to beg for scraps or hide from cruel hands. Who grow up knowing they belong. Garrett's eyes were bright. I'd like that. Then that's what we'll build. Emmy took his hand. Together. The first year of marriage brought more joy than Emmy had known existed. The ranch prospered. The railroad deal went through on their terms, bringing new opportunities and new wealth. Red Creek grew around them, and Emmy found herself at the center of a community she'd once feared. She opened a small school for the children of ranch hands, teaching reading and writing the way she'd taught herself. Martha ran the household with quiet efficiency. Clara visited weekly, bringing news and laughter, and the kind of friendship Emmy had never had before. And through it all, Garrett was there. Changed, but still himself. Softer with her, but no less strong. A partner in every sense of the word. One autumn morning, Emmy woke with a secret she couldn't keep any longer. She found Garrett in the stable brushing down Shadow. He looked up when she entered. You're pale, he said immediately. Are you sick? Not exactly. Emmy took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. The brush fell from Garrett's hand. What? A baby. We're having a baby. For a long moment he just stared at her. Then his face transformed, not with the slow smile she knew, but with something brighter, something like wonder. A baby, he whispered. A baby. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. Put me down. Emmy laughed. I'll be sick. He set her down but didn't let go. His hands framed her face. A baby, he said again. Our baby. Are you going to keep repeating it? Probably. He kissed her. Forever. The months that followed were the hardest and happiest of Emmy's life. Her body changed. Her moods swung wildly. Some days she felt invincible. Others she could barely rise from bed. Through it all, Garrett stayed close. He read to her when she couldn't sleep. He rubbed her swollen feet without being asked. He talked to her belly in low, private murmurs that made her heart ache with tenderness. "What are you telling it?" she asked one night. "Everything." His hand rested on the swell of her stomach. "About the ranch, about the stars, about its mother." "What about its mother?" Garrett looked up at her. "That she's the bravest person I know, that she came from nothing and built everything, that no matter what happens, she'll always fight for what she loves." Emmy's eyes filled. "You're going to spoil this child." "Absolutely." He kissed her belly. "Starting right now." The baby came on a February night in the midst of the worst storm the territory had seen in a decade. Emmy labored for 12 hours while wind howled outside and rain lashed the windows. Garrett paced the hallway like a caged animal driving Silas, and the hands half mad with his restless energy. "You're wearing a hole in the floor," Silas finally said. "Sit down." "I can't sit down. I can't." A scream from the bedroom cut him off. Garrett went white. "I can't do this." "You ain't doing anything. She's doing it." Silas put a hand on his shoulder. "Your job is to be there when it's over. To hold that baby and tell Emmy she did good. What if something goes wrong? Then you deal with it, like you deal with everything." Silas's voice softened. "But it won't. That woman in there is stronger than any storm. She'll come through." Garrett nodded, not trusting his voice. An hour later the cry came. Not a scream. A different sound, small and new and impossibly alive. The door opened. Josie stood there, tears streaming down her face, smiling. "It's a girl," she said. "A perfect, beautiful girl." Garrett pushed past her and into the room. Emmy lay in the bed exhausted but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in white cloth, was the smallest person he'd ever seen. "Come meet your daughter," Emmy whispered. Garrett crossed to the bed on trembling legs. He looked down at the baby, red-faced, squalling, absolutely perfect. "She's got your eyes," Emmy said. "She's got your spirit." Garrett touched the baby's tiny hand. Fingers curled around his. "I can already tell." "What should we name her?" Garrett thought of his sister, the one he'd lost, the wound that had never healed. "Sarah," he said quietly. "If you're willing." Emmy's eyes filled with understanding. She knew the story now, all of it. "Sarah Sullivan." She tested the words. "I like it." Garrett leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you. For everything. For her. For us. For—" His voice broke. "For seeing me when nobody else would." Emmy smiled, tired, triumphant, absolutely certain. "That's what love does," she said. "It sees." The years that followed brought more children, twin boys who inherited their father's stubbornness and their mother's fire. The ranch continued to grow. The town of Red Creek became a proper city, with Emmy's school at its heart. Garrett never lost his edge entirely, but he learned to soften it. He laughed more, worried less, found joy in the small moments he'd once overlooked. And Emmy, the girl who'd once had nothing, who'd been invisible and overlooked and told she was worthless, became the woman everyone looked to. For advice, for strength, for proof that starting over was possible. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the creek where it all began. The water ran clear and cool, just as it had that summer morning. The cottonwoods swayed in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, their children's laughter echoed across the land. "Do you ever think about it?" Emmy asked, trailing her fingers through the water. "What would have happened if you'd ridden a different direction that day?" Garrett considered the question. No. Because it doesn't matter." He pulled her close. "Every path I could have taken would have led here. To you. I believe that." "That's very romantic for a man made of stone." I'm not made of stone anymore. He kissed her temple. You fixed that. Emmy laughed. I didn't fix anything. I just saw what was already there. And what was that? A man who'd forgotten how to hope. She turned to face him. And a home waiting to be built. Garrett held her gaze. 10 years of marriage, 3 children, 1,000 struggles, and 1,000,000 small victories. And still, when he looked at her, he felt like the luckiest man alive. I love you, he said. I don't say it enough. You say it every day, just not always with words. Still, you should hear it. He took her hands. I love you, Emmeline Sullivan. I loved you when you were afraid. I loved you when you were brave. I loved you through storms and railroads and everything else this world threw at us. And I'll love you until they put me in the ground, and probably after. Emmy's eyes shone. That's the most you've ever said at once. Don't get used to it. She laughed and kissed him, and for a moment they were young again. 2 strangers at a creek discovering something neither had dared to hope for. That evening they walked home hand in hand. Sarah ran to meet them at the gate, the boys tumbling behind her. Josie waved from the porch. Martha rang the dinner bell. And Emmy looked at it all, the land, the house, the family she'd built, and felt her heart fill to bursting. She had come here with nothing. A girl nobody wanted. A story nobody believed. Now she had everything. Not because someone had given it to her. Not because she'd gotten lucky or been rescued or stumbled into fortune. Because she had chosen it, fought for it, built it with her own 2 hands and her own stubborn heart. That was the truth of Emmeline Crawford Sullivan. She had been invisible once, but she had made herself seen. She had been alone once, but she had found her people. She had been told she was worthless, but she had proven them wrong. And now, standing in the doorway of the only home she'd ever known, surrounded by the family she'd created, Emmy finally understood what freedom really meant. It wasn't escaping. It wasn't running. It was choosing to stay. It was building something worth staying for. It was love given freely, returned in full, and strong enough to weather any storm. The girl at the creek had dreamed of freedom. The woman at the door had found something better. She had found home.